Hi, I'm songwriter and music producer Lem Springsteen, and you are watching The Artists Forum.
Welcome to the Artist Forum. I'm your host, Elliot Torres. My guest today is a songwriter, producer, and remixer who's worked with the likes of Ultranate, Masters at Work, and Janet Jackson. I'm pleased to be joined by Lem Springsteen. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure. I would love to start with how you got your start into the music industry. What was it about the music industry that drew you in?
That's a long story. Do you have time? Actually, the first, I would say, the most important experience I had was my father was the accountant for the Commodores before Lionel Richie left to go solo. So I would go as a young boy, as a youngster, I would go to see Earth, Wind & Fire and the Commodores perform and the emotions, and the show was so spectacular that as a youngster, it kind of really influenced me, and the outfits, the sound, the melodies, the harmonies, the crowd reaction. It just was, it played, I would say, the most pivotal part in my decision making to kind of, yes, I want to do music.
And back then, what music in terms of, was it that type of music that drew you in, or was it just music in general?
Just music in general. I mean, back then, you know, I was a child, so when he was working for the Commodores at the time, I was still really young, so I was like any other child, you know, listening to us on the radio, and then as I became older, went to college, I fell into the whole club scene. But I grew up on R&B and rock, you know, typical American, what was playing on the radio. My dad played the Commodores around the house, a lot of jazz stuff, and some classical as well. And my mom was a huge gospel. She sang in the church. She got me singing in the church when I was a young boy, so you know, you hear gospel at one end, you hear the jazz and the classic soul and the classical music, and then my brother's DJing hip hop in another section of the house. So it was pretty much a lot of eclectic stuff. So typical American, where you're influenced by your parents, what they like, as well as what your friends like, and as you kind of develop your own sound, you know, I went through the whole phase of R&B to dance to club music. So, but pretty much, yeah, that's pretty much the beginning.
And you wear a lot of hats, but what specifically, which one of the roles that you have draws you in the most?
Well, you know, I've worn a lot of hats, and I would say I've grown into being a producer.
Okay.
I started out as a songwriter, and I went through the phases of myself wanting to be an artist. You know, after, as a youngster, seeing these groups perform and having that experience, that was my first entrance into wanting to do music. I wanted to actually write the songs, play them, and I was always a background singer, not a lead vocalist, but you know, I went through the phases of just writing songs for myself, and then eventually decided that, okay, well, you need to get other singers to sing them, and you know, start working with other artists that are signed to labels. But so I've worn a lot of hats where, you know, I started out as a songwriter, and I still am. But I know that I had to work on my craft as, nowadays, an engineer, a producer. You have to know how to, when you go into a record label, you have to have a finished product. So you just can't be just a songwriter nowadays. You just can't be just a producer, you know. You just can't be a musician. You have to know kind of how to make a record sound, how you want it to sound, who's going to sing it, what type of song is it. So that requires you to wear a lot of hats.
Okay, and can you describe, for example, a day in a producer's life where you're working on a project and what goes into that day specifically?
Well, it really depends per project. When I was with my previous production company, where I was working consecutively as a remixer for record labels overseas as well as in America, that day, I'm going to talk about that to where I am now. During that time, where you are employed by record labels, you have a deadline, you also have a budget. The budget's allocated to, okay, so here's Janet Jackson's vocals, we want you to do a remix on it. And this is the direction the A&R would sit with you and tell you, this is the direction we want to go in. We like your sound as a producer, but we want this direction mixed with this sound, that's the direction. Here is, there's a timeline when we want it back. And we were doing that consecutively for quite many years. So basically as a remixer, you're meeting deadlines. And as a producer too, if you're actually a working producer and you're working for different artists, you have a project deadline that's allocated by the record label.
Do you feel that your process is either hindered or you benefit from it when the label comes in and tells you, no, that's not working, or can you try something different, or how do you feel about that when you're in the zone and in the process? I mean,
that's a good part. I personally like direction. So it's a good thing when the label can actually give you concrete direction. Because when you're not working for record labels and you're just, the songwriter producer and you're making stuff in your bedroom studio, unless you are really, really focused on like what style you want to do, what sound, how you want it to sound, unless you're really, really focused, you know exactly all the elements that need to be in it, you could be all over the place.
Okay.
You can be, you can veer off into just so many different directions, musically, vocally, lyrically. So it's really good when there is a person in charge. When there's an authority basically saying like, okay, it needs to sound like this.
Right.
So I kind of work better that way.
Okay.
I kind of work better. I mean, I like the creative part, don't get me wrong, but I kind of like the person to come in and say, okay, well, let's pull it to this direction, or let's pull it to that direction.
Right.
So you need that person, you need that A&R.
And the music industry has changed, over the years.
Yes,
so,
it has.
as a producer, how do you feel? How has that changed the way you work and the way you do business?
Well, I'm going to tell you something like a little joke. I remember a couple of years ago, I think right after 2000, when the internet was like in full swing, at least to when I realized it was in full swing around 2000. People were getting discovered by the amount of hits they had on their, well, back then it was MySpace.
Okay.
MySpace page, big record labels were finding these singers and signing acts. So if you didn't have a lot of hits already on your pages in any social media from MySpace to where it is now, and that's been consistent for the past 10 years, you're considered not popular, and that is going to be a deterrent for record labels to find interest in your talent. Before it used to be, here's a new kid on the block, he or she is talented, they get pulled in by someone, and their talent is they perform and they show what they can do, and someone says, you know what, I'm going to invest X amount of dollars in you. Now you have to do that all yourself. You have to actually come to the table with a music video already done to get fans, because you either can do it the garage mom and pop way, where you're just playing a guitar in front of, or you can, do a whole production and film it, or you can actually act as a record label, do your production, make the music video, and put it out there, and hoping that you're going to get fans that way.
Now, do you feel, though, because now that music is so accessible, that that's benefited you in a way that it's giving you more exposure?
Well, I mean, it has its, it has
it's like a double-edged sword.
It's a double-edged sword. Yeah, it is a double-edged sword because, I've heard so many other people say this before, that the internet, the great things that it opens up relationships. It's making the world smaller. I've got gigs, DJ gigs from Facebook. So in that aspect, it's really good. You can learn how to do things in 5 seconds. So that's a lot of great things. There's a lot of negative sides of it too, because music has dropped. Music and art basically they don't have the same price on them like they used to.
Okay.
It used to be experience years ago. When you want to go into a record store, have an experience with your girlfriend, your boyfriend, or whoever, and go look at the records and actually touch it, and and really see the artwork on it and get inspired from that, and just kind of imagine, I wonder what it sounds like. The artwork is so cool. I wonder what it sounds like. That experience is different. It's not the same anymore. You're looking on a small little screen, but also it's the cost of it. And the fact that today it's hurt a lot of people. It's trickled down to, the bigger artists to even just a smaller writer. So I mean, the fact that people are taking YouTube audio from a YouTube video and basically taking the audio from that and stealing it. A lot of file sharing. So the file sharing thing has really hurt a lot of this industry. So
how has it changed the way you create and work?
That's a good question. I really don't let that affect me. I went through that phase where it did affect me. Now I'm actually back to the stage of I have to feel it, and it has to sound good. It has to be for the right artist that I'm working with as far as the song. I'm not so caught up in the whole thing of the downside of, well, sales are so low, there's no artist even in America that did an album. I believe actually the sales, no one actually hit platinum. I think no one went platinum this year, from what I've been told. Because of the sales that just have dropped dramatically. But I don't want to approach it or discourage anyone from doing music because it's a passion. It's kind of like, it's like a relationship you just can't get rid of. I'm married to the feeling of like, when you're creating a piece of music that you like. And
what does that do for you? How would you describe it?
Oh man, it's a rush. It's a rush. It's like a sonic art piece. It's like, the visuals come out, the audio comes out in visuals, and it's like you can create so many different landscapes with a song or an instrumental piece. Even in house music, it doesn't matter whether it's house, pop, R&B, soul. I mean, you're creating layers of stuff, you know, and so those layers kind of create a mood, and that mood can take you to a certain place. I'm addicted to that.
Okay.
It's like a rush. So I mean, I can't. So even despite all the negative stuff about sales and
the rush that you get from the creative process still remains, and that keeps
me going. Yeah.
Right.
Pretty much.
Awesome.
That's the only reason it's keeping me going. Yeah.
Well, we're going to take a moment to listen to some of your new stuff.
Cool.
So we'll go ahead and play that, and then we'll talk about it.
Cool.
All right. So how is that sound that we just heard different from your sound in the past? Because now you're a solo producer, and I know that you were part of a partnership, Mood to Swing.
Yes.
So how are your two sounds different then and now?
It's a good question. Well, I mean, I've learned a lot from like working with Mood to Swing. I mean, it's still, how is it different? I guess it's the fact that I'm doing everything. I'm trying to merge kind of what I've experienced in the whole club scene to like what, everyone's saying that all the, everything turns around. So the 90s house scene is kind of coming back, and pretty much only what it means to me is that the younger generation is kind of straying away from commercial music, kind of what everyone goes through when you're growing up in your 20s. You kind of don't want to hear what's on the radio. You want to find something that's kind of alternative to the radio, because the radio's playing it over and over and over again. Which is not a bad thing, but it's just pretty much you stray away from that. So my sound now is a mixture of what I've already done to just trying to merge it to what's happening today.
Okay, and how would you say that the house music now is different from the 90s, let's say? Well,
I mean, EDM is pretty much the mainstream of house music, which is kind of like the electronic stuff. I've come out of a more soulful house scene, but that is what I did when it comes to dance music. I was more known for doing more soulful-ish, I would say, because this guy is way more soulful than I am, but I've been influenced by so many different kinds of music and so many different kinds of artists that that influences what I do in dance music. So I think I have a sound, you know, it's kind of a jazzy-ish kind of sound that I incorporate into dance music, but then I put this pop kind of, pop as far as in the songwriting, so it's actually catchy.
Okay.
Sometimes I don't go all the way there. I kind of actually, it's a formula in my head. It's not like a formula on paper, but it's kind of a formula in my head where I kind of give it a little bit of soul, a little bit of pop, a little bit of edge, a little bit of softness. So it kind of appeals to a wider audience.
And when you're creating your sound, what inspires you besides music? Are there other things that you draw inspiration
That's a good
from?
question. Yeah, I actually do draw inspiration from scenery, art. When I say art, I'm not talking about art and art pieces, but architecture and pretty much design. Every time I travel, I get a chance to go somewhere, and from somewhere where it's old Europe to modern Art Deco to landscape. Just I remember I was a friend of mine took me out to some crazy but yet beautiful green landscape and just miles and miles of green grass. And I put on my headphones. I actually had a bunch of instrumentals with me, and I just got so many song ideas. So I'm really inspired by my environment, and I think that the record that hit for me, which was Alternate Free, was out of what I was having chaos in my life, you know, and I think she was dealing with the same thing. So it's weird because sometimes they say in songwriting, not producing, because producing you're just wearing the hat of like making the music or making the beats. But as a songwriting, you're pulling from experiences that happen to you daily and into your life, and sometimes they say that chaos creates the best, it's the best anecdote for good songs. You know, sometimes people can relate to the chaos or it transfers from the chaos into like something positive, you know.
What so you know, what's next for you? Do you have any upcoming projects?
Yeah, I'm actually getting back into collaborating with people. Right now I'm just did a collaboration with Louis Vega, who is you know, very famous DJ. He travels around the world, has a show on WBLS, and he's known for a particular sound. And we can still, you know, I kind of started in-house music around the same time. Well, when I started in house music, I started with knowing him and people like David Morales and certain DJs. And even though I had my songwriting influences and people that influenced me on the songwriting side, as far as the production, how things are supposed to sound in a genre, I kind of came up with the likes of, you know, Louis Vega and Kenny Dope, Gonzalez, and David Morales, and Danny Tenaglia, excuse me. And all these big DJs, so that would kind of dictate like what the production should sound like, or at least close to it, because these are the guys that are in the clubs. So it's one thing where you're making a production for yourself, or you're making it for a particular outlet, to as if you're trying to get the DJs to actually play.
Gotcha.
If that makes any sense.
No, yeah, it totally does. And what would you say are your goals, and what would you need to achieve them?
Well, I've learned that through, gosh, man, I actually started this production company right out of college, and I've learned that to really kind of get to the next levels in music, you need managers. You know, like actors have agents. You need the right manager. I have an assistant, but she's not my manager. She's kind of helping me kind of get through stuff with administrative things that need to get done. But everyone needs a good manager. So when I had the right timing to actually seek out the right manager in the right territory, I kind of didn't hardcore do that. And that's kind of where I'm at right now, looking for a manager. And also I started my own label. Now that everything is, you know, I was going through the phase of actually doing albums, and I did small albums for small independent labels here in New York. And then everyone just kind of made me realize this is not an albums market, it's a singles market. So I'm pretty much just set up my imprint as a way to release singles. You know, of my own productions featuring different vocalists. And sometimes the vocalist is an American sound, sometimes it's a non-American sound. Just trying to
Is releasing singles a new approach that people are doing in terms of as opposed to
As opposed to albums?
Yeah.
If you already have the situation where you're performing the album live, and you already are a band, or even in house music, there's bands that actually perform this live. If you already have that kind of in the works, then it makes more sense to do an album, because you already have the venue of a tour manager probably on board, and you already have places that you could actually, perform at. Most people now, it's weird, in this genre, it's more about the DJ. They're making more money than the singers. Before it was about the singers and the live shows, that the singers, obviously the producers are making the record, but the singer was the act.
Right.
And I'm producing this song for this artist. She's going to perform it at these different venues, and if the song blows up, she performs it around the world.
And you have DJs playing in arenas now,
Yeah,
where
now
they used to be limited to the nightclubs,
Yeah.
and now they're actually playing arenas.
Yeah, DJs are playing arenas, so they're drawing the numbers, and the singer is secondary compared to the actual DJ.
Okay. And what advice would you give to someone that's just starting out and looking to go the same path as you?
Finish college. Believe in yourself. Definitely believe in yourself. I mean, you have to kind of have resilience, that strength to kind of deal with no's and yeses. There's sometimes you'll shop your music to people, and if you're going that route, or you're trying to sell your project to a venue or something, and some people will say, I don't like it, or I'm not interested, or some people will love it. So you have to really believe in yourself and kind of also know your craft. Know where you're best in your craft.
That's definitely important.
That's very important.
Very
Yeah,
important
that's
to
very
know
important.
that first, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, then, I just want to say that it's a pleasure having you here today. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
And if you'd like to learn more about Lem Springsteen, please visit his website, urbanloungemusic.com. I'm your host, Elliot Torres, and I'll see you next time on The Artist Forum.